All right, today we are going to talk about what I believe is the most valuable and important question that agents can answer. And Lacey Conway is with me, Senior Vice President for HomeServices of America. Lacey, this is something that you and I were talking about this. Really, the ability to have confidence as an agent, the ability to answer the most often asked question really kind of sets the stage for who we are as agents and as leaders in this industry. So I'd love for you just to share the idea of what that is. And you were the one who first brought this up to me, and it really rang true. So I'm excited to give people and empower them today with how to answer this question.
And it feels like such a basic question, but I think if you really think about what are you the most frequently asked as an agent in your world, and that would be, to me, people say, how's the market?
Right.
But what an awesome opener for conversation and a way to shine.
Yes.
And I think when agents have that confidence to answer, whether it's, focusing on buyers or sellers, but having a really strong response to that question, to me, is key. And as we were talking about it, there were a couple things that stood out as maybe do's and don'ts, or, hey, lean into this, or, when you say this, you sound less confident or less knowledgeable. And, through that conversation, I would say, man, what are the things that really make somebody impressed or go, God, this person knows the market.
Right.
They really know what's going on, because I would say so many agents do, but it's sharpening that conversation and getting it down to maybe it's a couple minutes, but when you can grab somebody and really hit them and say, God, again, this person is knowledgeable. That's what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And look, I think if you're explaining this the way that I've heard it before is if you're explaining that the market, what is the market like, and you just use an adjective, it's whatever. It's great.
We'll give some examples. So if I'm like, Jimmy, how's the market?
Oh, it's really good.
It's hot. Some people say that's interesting, but really, when you can get to the meat of it, units are up. The average sales price in this price point has risen by this much. I'm seeing a lot of movement in the 500,000 to 700,000 category. It's also great when you can curate that. If hey, I'm jumping around, but let's go back. Sometimes, and this is what's great, we have agents all over the country, but when people ask how's the market, sometimes you want to say, I know you work a lot of markets. Being able to talk specifically. I know, as an example, I live in New Orleans. We have neighborhoods that can change dramatically.
Correct.
Dramatically. 4 blocks this way, 5 blocks this way. Oh, my goodness. So to me, being very specific, how's the market? Look, let me tell you, this market is, again, and I would say, avoiding the volume, the sales volume can be tricky. But like you said, I would avoid using the adjectives. Get specific. Is it units? Is it what's moving in the market? Drill down.
Yeah, and I'll give you some examples. Like here, I'm on the 30A market from that perspective. And so we get that question a lot, obviously. And they'll say, how's the market? One of the best things I ever heard that Tom Ferry said this years ago. And he said, when you're asked that question, one of the things is to say, well, it depends. Are you looking to buy? Are you looking to sell? Are you looking to rent? And understanding where they're coming from to be able to speak specifically to them is such a great point. I'll use an example right now. I just pulled these numbers because you cued me to do this. And so literally I pulled these numbers and just thinking back, and if that question was asked today, it'd be very easy to say, hey, listen, actually year to date, here we are at the beginning of April. And so here we are. Was it the beginning of April? I'm all turned around. Yes, it is. Beginning of April. Yeah, beginning of April. We are up 37% in the number of closed transactions for single-family homes on 30A from compared to last year. Now, a couple things are factors there, and this goes back to having that conversation. In February of 2022, where we hit the peak as far as the lowest amount of inventory we had around 114 houses for sale on 30A. Right now, we're over 800. Now, you can see that typically what happens with that is we begin to see that move up. One of the things that happens when you have that is then you look at the transaction side, because simple economics are that you've got demand and you've got supply. So the demand, what's happened with it? We just talked about what happened with the supply. The supply has gone up. What happened with the demand? When we're looking at the transactions from our high in 2022 to where we are now, we're obviously off pretty substantially there. So when you think about it, simple supply and demand tells us, economics-wise, tells us if you have more supply, you have less demand, prices are going to be flat to down. That's exactly what we're seeing. Now let me go back to what we were talking about, what's happened so far this year. We peaked up over 1,000 homes for sale. Now we're around 800. In the last month, we we had an absorption in the market where we went from almost 6 months worth of average days on market to 4 months days on market. So what we're seeing is we're seeing an opportunity to see that where we're seeing a balancing of the market. So whether you're a buyer or a seller, there's opportunity, but the key is to have a professional who can tell you where those opportunities are and to be patient with you to find the right place. So those are the kind of things where that's a little bit different answer than it's great. So how do we apply this?
I mean, are you impressed? I mean, he obviously knows the market. Right. And I think that's what is so wonderful about having this conversation. Every agent that I know of is capable of having these conversations.
Right.
But wow, I mean, you can tell you've studied the market.
Right.
You know, anybody would feel very confident working with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it all starts with having the, and I will say this, I've always said, your confidence as an agent starts with your competence. And so going back and understanding your market, and like you said, where is the area that you want to specialize in so that you can absolutely know that market? Some key components there, understanding what's the inventory versus where it was before. Also, understanding what's the average sales price. See, I didn't even mention this in this. We're off 1% on the average sales price year over year with those transactions.
Yep, okay.
So from that standpoint, we're pretty flat, which means that there's opportunities, and especially if you're being very specific on that. Understand what the average days on market, average price is, understanding how much inventory. All of those are key factors that you can speak to people, and then don't just tell the stats. You know, I can remember stats will tell, but stories will sell.
Yes.
So you want to give some examples of that, like utilizing some of those and giving some examples of some of those stories where you lead them in.
I think in conversation when people engage an agent or are curious about the market, they want to hear those stories about, you know, whether it's some extreme outlier or, you know, let me tell you, because you have the inside track. And all of this conversation kind of comes down to they want to know where the value is. Like you said, where the opportunity is. Hey, I really think something about when you can tell a story, if there was, hey, I've been working a lot in the higher end and the luxury, but man, let me tell you what has really set these apart. I've noticed that a lot of buyers today are gravitating more towards having, you know, a study or a home office, and whatever that story is. What are the themes that you are seeing that help tell the story to sell it? And again, I feel like so many agents that I know, you have this knowledge, you have this experience, and it also could be. You could have been the agent that just walked through the house and you're talking with an agent in your office. You don't have to be the agent that maybe sold the house, but getting out, and again, it's all about knowing the market. People love when they say, oh, gosh, yes, and I know what you're talking about. I love that house. And you can say, I've got a few that I know of that you may like. So anyway, it's using that data to let them know that you are really a knowledgeable professional, rounding it out with some of that, you know, anecdotal but real-world experience that I think is what is really going to set you apart. But being able to nail that, how's the market, to me is critical. Yeah.
So some of the things that I try to do too is obviously I'm not still in sales, but I hear all the stories from our agents. And so I'll give you a perfect example. If we were talking like right now about to somebody who was considering selling and they're like, hey, you know, what's the timing like? This past week, we had a home that was $2.475 million that came on the market. And people were concerned because, you know, if you look at the data, over half the houses aren't selling right now. They're expiring, so to speak, or being taken off the market. And so there's that concern. And so understanding that's that concern, being able to then come back and say, hey, listen, one of the agents in our office actually had a new listing this past week. They were very strategic in the pricing and in the marketing launch, which is so critical when you're doing this.
Yes.
And they were able to get 5 offers on the first weekend on this $2.5 million house. And end up going under contract over ask price. Now, that may not be what you're seeing in the news, but there are strategies, there are things. And this is kind of the way that I would explain those stories. And then on the buyer side, some of those things, it would be like, you know, someone says, well, we've been looking for a while. Say, listen, let me give you an example. We have an agent that was working with a buyer who they have been looking for 3 years, and they just wanted to make sure they felt like they were doing that. One of the things we told them is listen, don't ever, you know, don't complain about the things that you prayed for. You prayed to have more opportunities. You prayed to have more negotiation skills. And so from that standpoint, that agent looked with this person for 3 years. We really narrowed in on exactly what they wanted. We were able to find the ideal home because of the connection we have with other agents, because we're subtly selling this, we were able to find a house that was before it came on the market, so that we were able to find something that was not necessarily what they were thinking about. And we were able to negotiate in a way that gave them something that they saw value. They were excited, and they bought the home that they've been looking for 3 years. So there is opportunity. So if you're a buyer, it's key that you have somebody that can help you. It's key that you have somebody that has access to information from other agents. And it's key to have somebody that has a strategy on making sure they negotiate in a way that gets you the best price possible. So these are some of those stories. So let's look back then. Obviously, what I love about this is that you're not speaking from a place of theory. This is experience. Yes. Obviously, you were an agent for over 10 years. You were a manager. Then you moved in, obviously, into an executive role, and then at a corporate executive role. So you've seen at all levels. I'd love to go back to your personal situation. Whether that be where you shared it with an agent, or maybe you did this in your personal sales business where it made a difference.
And I can say, gosh, what a lucky time we're all in. I think back when I was an agent, information was maybe harder to find. It was there, but you had to dig a little harder. And I think lucky us that I know, for our companies, we have access to so much information. And I think especially the time that we're in, where your clients have access to a lot of information too, you really need to show that you've done your homework. So when I was an agent, a lot of examples of some of the regular, you're pricing a home, but again, this is a conversation that's happened in the past, and it will continue in the future. I was always asked, how's the market? And at sometimes early on in my career, I was a little bit nervous because, what do I know about the market? And it was a very, I sort of focused on things that were happening with my clients or in my world. And that was fine, but the conversation started to evolve where you realize that you need to be more complex. You start off with clients that might be, hey, working on a rental, hey, we're working on maybe a first-time home, and then you start expanding your business, and you need to have more to talk about and to be more knowledgeable. So my personal experience with that was, and another bit of advice for agents out there too, really dig into the tools that you have at a brokerage level. There are so many, whether it's even within your MLS, but I was forced to break down, and look at different price points and figure out what was going on with these markets. I think as that evolved into a leadership position where you were looking at multi-markets, it became even more important to have that easy bit of conversation. If you were to ask me, how is the Lafayette market versus New Orleans? What are driving these markets? I mean, the conversation can grow and grow and grow. So I think, and again, through my practice of going, wow, okay, I was invited to do a panel on, let's call it luxury, anything $1 million and above. What's happening in our markets? I always surprised myself with knowing which markets were growing. Like it actually helped us expand and say, hey, we might need to look at an office, to be very specific, say Covington, a market that's growing and has experienced a ton of growth. I was shocked to see that more of our listings above a certain price point were happening in that market versus some that I thought for sure they'd be here.
Right.
So it was a wonderful exercise to sort of check myself on knowledge, but to find new stories that were really relevant to our agent base, to other companies, to have better conversations. So I've just felt like, man, this is a topic that really resonates because I think it happens to agents, to their managers, to senior leadership. And it's so important to know what's going on in the market.
Yeah, and I think this is a good point, is a lot of times we can tell ourselves certain things are happening just because we've got our blinders on. We're just seeing our transactions. But taking the time to go and expand your understanding of what's going on in pockets of the market, price points in the market, size of homes in the market, all that stuff really does make a difference.
Yes.
Anything else you'd like to say to agents that are out there to prepare for this?
Practice.
Good.
As silly as that sounds, and look at different parts of the market. I have found, even when I've done this exercise, because I get asked quite a lot, that I've surprised myself. When I think I have an idea of where a certain market is, it's always great to balance that out. Breaking it into price points, and every market can be different. But to me, I've always been amazed by, even, hey, if you take an office, where does our business come from? Anyway, it's helping looking at the numbers and saying, gosh, okay, maybe there's another story to tell here. I had one in my head. Maybe I can validate it, but I think you'll surprise yourself. If you go through the motions, practice it, and then it's having conversations with other agents, and what are you finding? And those might pull out some of those anecdotal stories that help you round it out. But again, practicing, pull the data, check yourself, God, was I feeling that? Am I wrong? Wow, there's something different going on in the market. I think that will help you have more conversation that comes easily, whether it's at a cocktail party, you're at dinner, whatever it is. It's just the conversation will flow easier and you will feel more like an expert.
Yeah. I think literally the practicing, if we're thinking about this from that standpoint too, never want to practice on the prospects. You know what I mean? And so literally this gives us the opportunity, whether it be with other agents, we're using AI now, even just with the interactive there. There's so many different ways. Let me just say this in wrapping up. Obviously, Lacey, we gotten to spend some time the last 2 days. Obviously, I've known you through the industry from Ladder Bloom to Compass to everything you've done. Just so excited to have you as a part of the team and the family here at Home Services. Can't wait to see your leadership and the direction you help us move in. And so just so excited to be with you. And again, this is one of those where this is that conversation that all the agents should be prepared to have. And so thanks for your insight on all of this. Guys, I know you got some value out of this. Follow Lacey. Make sure you're letting her know how much you appreciate it. And we will talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching the video. I specifically chose the video below for you because it builds on the one you just watched. I hope it's helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.